Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallama tasliman kathiran. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Tonight, for those who wish to stay, those who are listening and watching online, and those who leave or those who have left, perhaps they will receive some of the fruits of the Prophet ﷺ's words. لِيُبَلِّغُ الشَّاهِدُ مِنْكُمُ الْغَائِبِ. Those who are present should pass on the message to those who are absent. So those who are here, and perhaps those who aren't here or aren't listening and watching, perhaps they'll benefit from this. And this is with regards to a problem here in this masjid, or an issue or discussion here in this masjid, and other masjids as well, but specifically this masjid. And that is what brothers brought up a few weeks ago with regards to praying in front of the Imam outside. Is it permissible to pray in front of the Imam from outside of the building? Then obviously our country and many other countries and continents and many other parts and places of the world are going through all types of chaos and havoc with regards to COVID-19, the pandemic. People getting sick, people dying, vaccinations, protesting, politicians, the subjects of those politicians saying that they're taking away our rights, invading our privacy, going back 40, 50, 70 years to this war, to this dictator, etc., etc. And the Muslims aren't going to be exempt from this. And one of the greatest harms of this worldwide pandemic, and how the rules and regulations are changing, how many of them are inconsistent, not making sense, hypocritical, blatantly, is going to be further injury, insult to injury to the already existing chaos within the Muslim world. The chaos within the Muslim world. And from that chaos is the lack of central leadership. From that chaos is widespread ignorance of Islam. From that chaos is the widespread of secularism and liberalism. From that chaos, those who are Muslims trying to practice, trying to follow the Sunnah, they may not necessarily have the proper knowledge and the proper fiqh and the proper understanding on what to do and what not to do during normal times, and on what to do and what not to do during times of chaos, when new things happen. So therefore you find brothers outside of the masjid. Some are separated, some aren't separated. Are you separated 6 feet? Are you separated 3 feet? Can you shake the brother's hand? Can you give him a dap? Can you give him a hug? You have your mouth covered, your nose covered, but your eyes are still exposed. Your ears are exposed. You shake this one's hand and you give him an elbow. You sanitize this, but you didn't sanitize that. I was in the store the other day. The lady said, 1 second, I have to sanitize the counter before you pay for this product. Her register, did she sanitize it? She's going to take my card. She's going to take my money. So it's Allahu Musta'an. So if the world regulations are out of whack or out of sync or inconsistent or unknown, then that's going to do nothing but add to the already existing chaos within the Muslims. And from that is the calamity of widespread ignorance. And those who have the knowledge but refuse to teach it. Those who have the knowledge but they're preoccupied from teaching it. Such as making money, earning a living. I graduated from Medina, but I work at this store. I studied overseas, but I have to have a 9 to 5. Or those who are too scared to tell the people that which the people need to hear. Or the normal layman people not listening. They don't care about knowledge. They don't care about the people who have knowledge. They don't want to listen. They don't want to learn. They don't want to be corrected. They don't want to be advised. They don't want to be recommended. Or they have a problem with a person because of a specific orientation. If you come from this part of the world, I don't want to listen to any Islamic teachings that you have. Or you follow this madhab, I come from this country, we have a different madhab. So it's nothing that you can tell me. Or you are a different race than I am. So it's nothing that you can tell me. Or age, or gender, etc., etc. These are all problems that we're suffering from. And this COVID-19 pandemic that's spinning round and round the globe is only adding to those problems. And from that, it's for us to understand and for us to realize to the most important physical act of worship, and that is prayer. Umar radiallahu anhu, as he led the noble companions in the Salat al-Fajr, reciting the Quran, he was the Imam of the Muslims, and back then the leader of the Muslims did not sit in a palace. He didn't sit in a house. He didn't have guards and secretaries, and he was open in public with the people. He led them in Hajj. He led them in battle. He led them in Salah. He gave them the khutbah. It was accessible. So he led the people in the Salah. And that wretch, that cursed wretch, that zindiq, that hypocrite who wasn't a Muslim, Abu Lu'lu al-Majusi, he was a Zoroastrian who accepted Islam outwardly. And he was mad and upset of the Muslim Arab conquest of different parts of Mesopotamia and Persia, Iraq and Iran today. And how the Muslims were unstoppable driving force. And they conquered those lands that had hundreds, and Allah knows best, even maybe thousands of years of quote-unquote glorious past. King Darius, right? Cyrus, King of Kings, Shah. Persia was an amazing, astonishing civilization, fighting and battling with Rome. And they were vanquished by some Arab marauders on horseback. It was a blow. Not only a physical blow, add into their morale. Here we are, the Persians, the pinnacle of civilization. You read about Darius and Cyrus. Read about those different kings. The Sasanians. Read about those different civilizations and what they did in medicine, technology, warfare. Read about what they did in comparison to the Arabs. So when the Arabs came to their lands, the Muslims came to their lands, we have to say both. Because they were Muslims first and foremost. Let's always strike one versus their religion. And also they were Arabs versus Persians. That's strike two. Thirdly, them being of a lower caste or class. So when they came into Iraq, into Iran, and opened up those cities, those grand conquests, al-Futuhat al-Arida, and they toppled them, defeated them, vanquished them on the battlefield, everyone didn't swallow it so easily. And many of those Persians and Mesopotamians, they wanted to seek revenge against Islam. They wanted to take revenge against the Muslims, revenge against the Arabs. Some of them outwardly fought them. And some of them were too smart for that. And they realized them on the battlefield. We couldn't fight the Muslims head on, face to face. So some of them entered into Islam acting as if they were Muslims, but they really never left off their old creed of worshiping other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they wanted to destroy Islam from within. And they made different innovations, they made different hearsays, and they made different factions among the Muslims, Ali, Muawiyah, so on and so forth, to destroy it from within, to take revenge against the Muslims that had destroyed their golden era. And from those people who accepted Islam outwardly was that man whose name was Abu Lu'lu al-Majusi. He was with the Muslims, in the rank with the Muslims in Salat al-Fajr. Umar was leading the Salah, and all of a sudden he stood forward. And before we continue the story, it's very important to understand the history of the early Islamic conquests. Very important. Why is there a country with this name? When did the Muslims go to India and East India? Obviously Bangladesh and Pakistan back then didn't exist as a separate country. Why are there Muslims in North Africa? Why are there Muslims in West Africa? Why are there Muslims here? It's important to know this. So he stood up and he jumped up and he withdrew a dagger and he viciously stabbed the Caliph Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu several times. Some say up to 19 times he stabbed him. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the narration states, istakhlafa Abdurrahman ibn Auf. He put in charge Abdurrahman ibn Auf to finish leading the companions in Salat al-Fajr. So they prayed and they offered the salah. Umar radiallahu anhu was taken back to a house, a doctor. They looked at him, they observed his body, his wounds, and they came to the realization that his wounds would be fatal. There's no question about that. And from those wounds, he was stabbed tremendously in his abdomen, one of the worst places to be stabbed, and one of the most painful ways of dying, as a fact. So Umar knocked out, he lost consciousness. And when he came back to consciousness, he from narration state, whether it was Abdullah ibn Abbas or others, he asked, the first question he says, Hal akmaltum salah? Did you finish the prayer? Did you guys make Salat al-Fajr? Did you finish Fajr prayer? Just imagine this now. If someone stabbed you once, how painful it is. A paper cut. You cut yourself with a kitchen knife. You ever been in a knife fight before? I'm sure some of you brothers may have been. On the streets, other parts, jail, whatever. It's vicious. It's not the same as shooting somebody from a distance. Being in a knife fight. Somebody cuts you and slash you. A razor blade, right? An ox, whatever you want to call it, from under the tongue. They cut you and slash you. You don't even know that you cut until after the fight. But for one thing's for sure is that you're going to feel the what? You're going to feel the pain of those cuts and slashes afterwards. So that's getting stabbed once, getting stabbed twice, 3, 4. Imagine getting stabbed all of those times. He woke up and the very first thing he said, did you guys finish Salat al-Fajr? Yes or no? I need to know that as your leader on his deathbed. And he told the Caliph, yes, we have. Oh, Amir al-Mu'mineen, we finished the Salah. And that's when Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, Ala أنه لا حظ لأحد في الإسلام ترك الصلاة أو كما قال رضي الله عنه. He says, for sure, prayer has no place in Islam. The one who does not pray, he has no hadh, there's no portion, there's no share for him, there's no slice of the pie for him who doesn't pray. He who doesn't make salah, he gets nothing of the portion of the hereafter. As Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions in the Quran about other people, that they won't have no khalaq, nasib. There's no portion for them in the hereafter but fire. So Umar radiallahu anhu, he says, did you guys finish making salah? And they said yes, they affirmed it. And he says, anyone who doesn't pray, he has nothing in this religion. To show you the importance of the prayer. And Umar radiallahu anhu is also quoted when he wrote to his governors and he instructed them. And we know how harsh Umar radiallahu anhu was. And how he removed certain governors for a small mistake, a small error. Said that he removed Khalid ibn al-Walid radiallahu anhu, who was undefeated in his battles. One of the most, if not the most successful general and commander of the Muslims. Umar removed him. And some say that he removed him for the Muslims not to think, and the Muslims to be far away from thinking and feeling that victory was based off of themselves. وَمَا النَّصْرُ إِلَّا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ. Victory is only from Allah. It's not because of Khalid ibn Walid and his courageous, fierce nature. A lion, safe of Allah. It's deeper than that. It's greater than that. It's a reason, yes. It's a means, yes. Striking fear. Skill. Tactics. Strategy, yes. No. All of these things are important militarily. But ultimately, it's the help of Allah that allows you to win. So he wrote to his governors, not asking them about the kharaj or ahl al-dhimma or the ushr, this tax, this fee, this. He asked them about the prayer. He says, "Inna ahamma a'malikum indi salah." He says, at the top of the list of your duties as my governors and deputies is establishing the prayer. Period. That's the top of your list. Think about that now. In your household, you being a husband or a father, is that at the top of your priority list, your children's prayer? It's an honest question. Or is it shoes, clothes, and jeans and jackets, blankets, bed covers, toys, teddy bears, college, scholarships, sports, politics, grades, engineer, physician, etc., etc.? Is the most important thing of your duties prayer? You're an imam of a masjid. Is that the most important of your duties? The khutbah ratio, the class ratio, you talk about the prayer, explaining the prayer, teaching the prayer. He says that the most important of your duties to me is the prayer. And he also said, radiallahu anhu, من حافظ عليها كان لما سواها أحفظ ومن ضيعها كان لما سواها أضيع. He says, he who strictly guards his prayer will do the same with the rest of his religion, even more. If you're praying all the time, on time, correctly, properly, your zakat will be spot on. Your fasting will be what? Spot on. Your hajj spot on. All the other affairs of the religion will be in order and in line if the salah is in order and in line. And we can all attest to this. You pray on time, you get up, you pray, everything is organized. Dhuhr comes in, Maghrib, Isha is organized, Jummah is organized. There's no doubt about that. How many sins you're going to make in the masjid? How many sins you're going to be making when you consciously stop to pray, to make wudu, so on and so forth. And it says, and whoever wastes the prayer, dayaha, is negligent. I forgot money, got to pay rent. It's 2020. It's New York City. Allah's Ghafur Rahim. Allah forgives. Allah knows the situation. I have a boss, etc., etc. I'll make salah later. I'll make the salah at the end of the day in my house. Then he will waste and neglect the rest of his religion even more. His zakat is going to be off point. Fasting is going to be off point. Hajj is going to be what? Off point. Major problems with his marriage, his relationship with his children is going to be off point. Because it all comes down from the prayer not being in order. So the prayer, and we can go on and on and on, from Quran and Sunnah, let alone the statements of the companions about the importance of the prayer, the importance of the salah. And from that are the different rulings and fiqh regulations that change and vary because of the situation. Extracted from the hadith in Sahih Bukhari of Imran ibn al-Husayn radiallahu anhu, in which he complained. He went to the Prophet ﷺ about a health condition that he was having. And some versions of this hadith say, كانت بي البواسير. I suffered from hemorrhoids. And I had a difficulty. It was painful for me to offer the prayer in the normal way. And that's when the Prophet ﷺ said, صلي قائما فإن لم تستطع فقاعدا فإن لم تستطع فعلى جنب. He said, pray standing, normally, if you can. And if you can't, you can pray sitting down. If it's too painful or difficult for you to pray sitting down, then you pray lying down. This hadith, among many others, proves and establishes the concept is that there's certain variables when it comes to the prayer. There are variables, certain conditions that alter the orthodox rulings, some of them. And from that is COVID. Is it permissible for the ranks to be separated 6 feet, 3 feet? Is that permissible or is that haram? That's a new thing. Is it permissible to pray outside even though there's space in the masjid? And from that, is it permissible to pray in front of the imam outside of the masjid within this little gate thingy or thingy, as they say in the UK? Is it permissible to pray there? A couple of weeks ago, brothers had asked the question. Some brothers didn't agree or agreed or arguing, debating, can you mention the proofs, blah, 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 blah. So that's what we want to discuss again tonight. Inshallah ta'ala. What do the scholars of Islam say about that, right? About praying in front of the imam in general. Is it permissible to pray in front of the imam? The imam's here and you pray here. And this is also, no doubt about it, more practical in America, UK, Canada as well, but we're talking about our country, because many of our masjids are rehabilitated houses or warehouses or buildings. And we don't have but so many mosques, quote unquote, that are built from the ground up, in which the engineers and the carpenters, the people, the masons, the stone masons, etc., the people, the interior decorators, they said that this is a prayer hall from day one. It's a house, now we're going to turn into a prayer. No. Pillars, rooms, steps, hills, slopes. All of those problems you run into when you convert a building, right? When you convert a building. This used to be a movie theater. This used to be an auditorium. This used to be a church. This used to be a synagogue, right? This used to be whatever it used to be. So therefore, this room is separated from what? That room. This pillar is in the middle. We can't move that. This slope, these stairs, etc. So the scholars of Islam, they talked about these rulings and lands in which the masjids were built from the ground up. If they spoke about them there, then of course here we need them even what? even more, because there are more different variables. Because it used to be a movie theater, the imam is higher than the people beneath him. They removed the chairs, but it's still a what? So the imam is higher and the people are lower. Or vice versa. The imam is down there and the people are what? Up there. The sisters are in a place or a location in which they can't see the imam. They can only hear him by microphone. Is that permissible? What did the Prophet ﷺ do in his masjid? The women were behind him directly. You can't be more pious than the Prophet. You can't have more jealousy for Allah's religion than the Prophet. Yet and still we say the women need to be what? Totally separated. It wasn't like that in the time of the Prophet. The women were behind the men. Of course there was a separation. The people, they lowered their gaze and they were behind the men. Now the women are in a whole different room. Many masjids you go to, the women are above the men. Is that permissible? Is that sunnah for women to be on another floor above the imam? That's a discussion. That's a fiqh discussion, right? So therefore, all of these different rulings, we need to understand them and tackle them. And we can't understand, tackle, discuss, or even debate unless we have the fundamentals locked down. And we build and base the things upon the fundamentals. All of this is included in Allah's statement that the believers are not to leave their homes all at once. وَمَا كَانَ. The believers are not to لِيَنْفِرُوا كَافَةً. They're not supposed to just go out. Allah mentions that a ta'ifa, that a group from the believers are to stay back. لِيَتَفَقَّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. For them to get the fiqh of the religion. And the Prophet ﷺ says that Allah wants good for a servant, He gives them what? Fiqh of the religion. And included in that are these different things that pop up and spring up. And there lies no doubt. Like people say, social media is the world today. If you're not involved in social media, there's not much to be mentioned. And that's COVID. If we're not discussing these rulings and these regulations, and if we're not realizing the impact that COVID has had on our lives within these months, going on a year, then we're definitely asleep. We're in a state of heedlessness. And we don't know if the worst is yet to what? Come. With regards to vaccinations. So on and so forth. So therefore, let's see what the ulama of Islam say regarding praying in front of the imam. That's first and foremost. And secondly, what can we apply to praying in front of the imam from behind the wall outside of the building? Everybody clear on this? Right. So I'm going to read a few fatwa here. And in actuality, they're not actually fatwa. In actuality, it's a collection and a compilation of a speech of the ulama of the past. All right? So the question here, I'm reading from islamweb.net. It says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. هل تجوز الصلاة أمام الإمام؟ التفصيل: جل المساجد عندنا بفرنسا كانت محلات تجارية حولت إلى مصليات، فهي ناقصة المرافق والترتيبات اللائقة مثل هذا المصلى الذي يقف الإمام في ركن من أركانه ويقف جل المصلين خلفه، وبعض المصلين وخاصة المصليات أمامه يفصل بينهن بستار لكن تسمع أصواتهن وكلامهن وإن خفيا، فهل تجوز الصلاة في مثل هذه الحال؟ علما أن القضية ليست ضرورية لأنه توجد مصليات بالقرب منه وجزاكم الله عنا خيرا كذا. So listen carefully to this question. The question says, is it permissible to offer the prayer in front of the imam? Can one pray in congregation but being in front of the imam? That's the summarized question. The details of the question state, listen carefully. It says most masjids here in France, like we said, Western countries. It says most masjids here in France used to be storefronts or buildings or warehouses, markets that were converted and turned into musallas. They were turned into what? Musallas. They weren't built from the ground up with the idea of it being a place of prayer. Okay? So therefore, there are different buildings that have less levels, more rooms, less rooms, bigger rooms, less rooms, slopes, like we mentioned, inclines, declines, etc. So is it permissible? So sometimes the imam is in a corner, the imam is in a room, people are behind him, some people are in front of him, above him, below him, beneath him. sisters, a curtain separates the imam and the women, so on and so forth. Is it permissible to pray in this instance or in this situation? Listen, last he says, but keeping in mind, oftentimes it isn't a necessity to pray in these areas, and that there are other musallas that are close by. And this is what I mentioned a few weeks ago. If it is or if it isn't permissible to pray in front of the imam outside, is it a necessity? If we still have space to go towards the back, why not go back instead of what? Going in front? And the door of chaos that will potentially open up. People keep praying in front. COVID's done, people are inside, why not pray out in the front? So on and so forth. So they say this, it's not necessarily it's not a necessity, is it permissible? So here, these muftis, and the people here are the scholars who run this website and the researchers who run this website. They say, Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi amma ba'd. فقد اختلف أهل العلم في صحة صلاة المأموم أمام الإمام على 3 أقوال. أحدها أنها تصح مع الكراهة إن كان ذلك بغير عذر، أما إن كان لعذر كضيق المسجد جاز من غير كراهة، وهذا مذهب المالكية. جاء في الشرح الكبير: وكرهت للجماعة صلاة بين الأساطين أي الأعمدة، أو صلاة إمام أو أمام أي قدام الإمام، أو بمحاذاته بلا ضرورة. وقال الدسوقي في حاشيته على الشرح الكبير قوله أو أمام الإمام أي لو تقدم الجميع، لأن مخالفة الرتبة لا تفسد الصلاة، كما لو وقف على يسار الإمام فإن الصلاة المأموم لا تبطل. وعند المالكية لا فرق في ذلك بين الرجل والمرأة. قال صاحب كفاية الطالب الرباني من المالكية: إلا أن المرأة إذا تقدمت إلى مرتبة الرجل أو أمام الإمام فكالرجل يتقدم، فيكره له ذلك من غير عذر، ولا تفسد صلاته ولا صلاة من معه. الثاني أنها لا تصح مطلقا، وهذا مذهب أبي حنيفة والشافعي وأحمد في المشهور من مذهبهما. قال الإمام السرخسي من الحنفية: وأن تقدم المقتدي على الإمام لا يصح اقتداؤه به. وقال الإمام النووي من الشافعية: إذا تقدم المأموم على إمامه في الموضع فقولان مشهوران: الجديد والأظهر لا تناقض. وقال الإمام ابن قدامة: السنة أن يقف المأموم خلف الإمام، فإن وقفوا قدامه لم تصح. الثالث أنها تصح مع العذر دون غيره، مثل ما إذا كان زحمة فلم يمكنه أن يصلي الجمعة أو الجنازة إلا أمام الإمام، فتكون صلاته أمام الإمام خيرا من صلاته وحده. وهذا القول قول في مذهب الإمام أحمد، ذكره الشيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية واختاره، وهذا القول هو أرجح الأقوال. قال الشيخ الإسلام رحمه الله: وذلك لأن التقدم على الإمام غايته أن يكون واجبا من واجبات الصلاة في الجماعة، والواجبات كلها تسقط بالعذر. وبهذا النقل أو تعلم أن الصلاة المأموم أمام الإمام لا تصح إلا إذا كان ذلك لعذر. فإن كان يمكن الاستغناء عن المصليات التي يحدث فيها تقدم على الإمام بغيرها من المصليات صحت فيها صلاة من تأخر خلفه، ولم تصح صلاة من تقدم عليه. وإن كان لا يمكن الاستغناء عن الصلاة فيها بالصلاة في غيرها، وكان المتقدم على الإمام معذورا لضيق المسجد ونحو ذلك، صحت صلاة الجميع. ولا يضر في مثل هذا تقدم النساء على الإمام مع وجود الساتر إذا لم يمكن جعلهن خلف الرجال، والله أعلم. The answer says is that this issue, the scholars of Islam have different views. They have different views on this issue, different angles, how they look at it. Can you pray in front of the imam or not? Different views, different schools of thought. Ikhtilaf or khilaf. Scholars from the 4 madhabs and others besides the 4 madhabs, they differ. Can a person pray in front of the imam or not? And obviously this is talking about in front of the imam in the masjid. In front, let alone a situation outside. So there are 3 main views with regards to this issue. The first view is that the prayer is valid. If you pray in front of the Imam, it's valid, but it's disliked. It's looked down upon. It's shunned. And it should not be done. The prayer can be valid, but it should not be done. It's makruh. It's looked down upon and then it's shunned. And we'll explain the details. The second view, he says, is that the prayer is invalid. Period. A need, no need, disliked, man in front of the Imam, a woman in front of the Imam, inside, outside, invalid. Prayer is no use, no value. And the third view is that the prayer is valid as long as there is an excuse. If there is a need, if there is a reason for someone to be in front of the Imam, then the prayer is valid. And it doesn't necessarily have to be valid with it being makruh. So those are the three views. So these muftis here, these researchers, they mention the details. The first view is the view of Imam, or not necessarily the view of the Imam, it's the view of the Maliki scholars. Not necessarily of Imam Malik. It's the view of the Malikis. Obviously we have brothers who come from North Africa, Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, right? Brothers who come from West Africa, Burkina Faso, Senegal, Ivory Coast, Guinea, so on and so forth, right? Who come from the tradition of the Malikis. So obviously, whether they're aware of that ruling or not, that's their traditional school. So their view is that the prayer is valid, but it is disliked. It should not be done if it doesn't what? Have to be done. You understand? It shouldn't be done if it doesn't what? Have to be done. It's makruh. It should be stayed away from. They hold the view is that it shouldn't be done, period, but it's valid. The second view is the view of Imam Abu Hanifa. The Muslims who come from Turkey, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, right? This part of the world. And Muslims who come from other parts of the world that are Hanafis. Many Muslims from the Caribbean who have their ethnic roots in India, right? They come from the tradition of Abu Hanifa. He says, was Shafi'i, and Imam Shafi'i. Muslims who came from Palestine, many are Shafi'i, some are Hanbali, many are Shafi'i. Muslims from Egypt of the later generations. It was a time in which the scholars of Egypt were Hanafis. And the big time, heavy duty muftis were Hanafis at a point in time in history. And then they turned it and it became officially Shafi'i, Azhar, so on and so forth. There was a time in which many scholars in Azhar were what? Were Hanafis. And that was the tradition that they followed or taught in the fatwa that they gave. Tayyib. He says here, wa Ahmed. And those who follow the tradition of Imam Ahmed, obviously, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, parts of Palestine as well. People that were what? Hanabila. Follow the tradition of that school. So Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i, and Imam Ahmed fil mashhur, the well-known view, because there were other side views of those imams, is that prayer is what? Invalid. And that prayer cannot be done. Whoever comes before or in front of the imam. And they quote different mashayikh and different ulama with regards to stepping in front of the imam. Tayyib. They say that the strongest view, this is their opinion, is that the strongest view is the first view. Is that the prayer is valid if there is an excuse. If it's valid, then it is a what? An excuse. Going back, he says here, something else I'm going to read word for word. He says what? He says, أَنَا تَصِحُ مَعَ الْعُذْرِ دُونَ غَيْرِهِ. Is that the third view, the view of Imam Ahmed, Abu Hanifa, Shafi'i, the well-known view, is that تَصِحُ مَعَ الْعُذْرِ دُونَ غَيْرِهِ. Is that it's only valid if there is an excuse. It's valid if there's what? If there is an excuse. So he says here, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, is that there is a version of Imam Ahmad's statement, is that if it is a necessity and a need, then it's valid. Janazah, Jama'ah, Eid, Jumu'ah, and their rationale that they use is that a person praying in front of the Imam is better than them praying by themselves. That's how they look at it. He said you can't pray in front. There's no space, there's no room. All right, so let me pray by myself. Or let's make a second congregation, so on and so forth. They said then praying with the Imam is better than him relinquishing himself from the Jama'ah with the Imam. Of being behind the Imam is something which is wajib. It's mandatory. And he gives a golden principle of fiqh here. He says, وَالْوَاجِبَاتُ كُلُّهَا تَسْقُطُ مَعَ الْعُذْرِ. Is that when there is a need or a necessity, then the obligatory things are no longer binding. You don't have to do them if you're compelled, like sitting down, even though you have to stand up. Like you can't face the Qibla. Everybody understand this? Things like this. So this here is the summary here with regards to the ruling in general. And then he speak about the specific French issue. He says that women being in front, if there's a need, they're covered, they're veiled, and there's no Imam, then that's okay. Meaning, if they can be behind the Imam, and if there is an alternative, then what? It's not okay. Whether the prayer is invalid or it is makruh, it's looked down upon. Everyone understand this? So we read here, this is a brief summary, is that the scholars of Islam have different details with regards to praying in front of the Imam. So me personally, my advice that I would give to the brothers here at Masjid Taqwa is not to pray in front of the Imam, to avoid confusion and to avoid differences of opinion, because their brothers are going to say your prayer is false, your prayer is invalid. And obviously, if I'm arguing and huffing and puffing with you, you follow madhab, I follow madhab, I don't have that much knowledge, it may lead to further a greater melee, unnecessarily raising of voices, people insulting other people, as we've seen many times before, unfortunately, when there are people who are impulsive and when there are people who don't have the necessary amount of ilm and hikmah and respect for another view and another opinion. So I'm sticking to what I said before. I would not advise, and I take the view that one who prays in front of the Imam, his prayer is invalid. It's batila. If there's a dire need and a dire necessity, then you have those ulama who said that it's what? It's valid, right? But to avoid confusion, avoid argument, avoid fighting, I would continue to say don't pray in this little cubby hole right there outside of the masjid and the gates. Rather instead go what? Further back. Put more tarps, or if you want to get technical, and if you really and blunt, spread the prayer rugs out towards the street. The people who walk by, they'll walk around if they have to. They'll know the prayer times. The Muslims are out there praying. It's not the end of the world. How many other religions and faiths have we seen flood the streets and block off the traffic? And they do it without a pinch of shyness. Is our funeral? What you think? Rather, we want to sue you for picking on us and pointing on us. Just think about that now. Think about the audacity of that. We want to break the rules, break the laws. The moment you come to enforce those laws on us, you're just doing this because of our religion and our culture. Think how backwards that is. I'm parked where I'm not supposed to be. Police officer says you can't be parked there. Oh, you just pulling me over because I'm black. You harassing me because I'm black. Oh man, this is racism. You're a racist white cop. You're this, you're that, you're a pig, you're so on and so forth. You just harassing me because I'm black. Slavery is over, so on and so forth. Maybe he is racist. Maybe. But the sign says no stopping, period. Bus zone. So regardless of how, whatever you want to call them, who broke the laws? I did. So now I'm gonna sue this police officer. I'm going to sue this police academy, these police people, because I felt like I was being racially targeted. And the same applies to speed. And you're doing 95 in a 65 zone, 55 zone. Cop pulls you over. Oh man, he's just pulling me over because I'm black. He's just pulling me over because I'm Arab. He's racially profiling. Maybe he is. Maybe he didn't stop the white person, but you were speeding. We got you on the radar doing 95. So how can a person break the rules, go against the laws, and then sue that? Wallahi, hajab, yani. That's, subhanAllah, that's amazing. But the moral of the story is that they what? They did it. And they had no shyness. And that's just a funeral. That's a funeral. They flooded the streets, blocked off the streets. So what stops the brothers from putting more prayer rugs down? It's not going to be the what? The end of the world. How long is the prayer going to last? 5 minutes, 10 minutes? It's not the end of the world. People walk across the street. It's not the end of the world. Or at least put another row there and leave a more slender pathway for the people to walk by. Instead of the people just putting one tarp, one prayer rug close to the buildings and the stores and having a big long sidewalk, put more prayer rugs towards the street and give the people a path to walk by. Or put the rugs further back. That is better than doing what? Coming in front of the imam. Because once you open up that door of khilaf, once you open up that door, people are going to start praying more in the front, and Allah knows best what else can take place. And the faqih, he has to look at the outcome, right? You can't just look at the first row of pieces. You have to look towards the back. You have to look towards the end game. And understand this, you have to look at the outcome. And there are many hadiths in which the Prophet ﷺ shut things down, closed things off, not because it was a bad thing, but because it would lead to something that was harmful. Said the dhara'i, khairan inshallah. So therefore, that's my advice. That's the opinion that I take, and that's what I think is best for the brothers here at Masjid Taqwa. Allah surely knows best. If the brothers follow another view or another opinion or details, that's inside of the masjid. They may say outside of the masjid, COVID, Corona, it's even worse, it's even more difficult. Jummah, we have to. If that's the decision of the imam or the imams here and their leadership, then so be it. So be it, inshallah ta'ala. But that's my advice, is not to do that and to do the opposite. To go further back, further across, out of necessity. With Allah Azza wa Jal is all success. Take a few questions if we have enough time. Take a few, inshallah. Are there any questions from the brothers here? Fadl akhi.
There's a hadith, the removal of trustworthiness from the heart. So in the hadith, he says that the Prophet ﷺ told him about two things. He said that Umar was the door for one of them. You know this hadith? Can you
He's talking about the hadith. Well, it is more than one hadith you have here. There's two hadiths. You have the hadith about fitnatul rajul, the test and the trial of a man. Is more than one hadith. Hudhayfa narrating this one, Umar, his assassination. Just stay with me for a second. You have the hadiths regarding how and his fasting and his salah and sadaqah will expiate that fitna. And Bukhari and Muslim. Right? And then there's be a fitna tamuju ke mawj al-bahr. And there'll be another fitna that will roar like the waves of the sea. And how this door will not be open, but it will be smashed open. And how Umar radiallahu anhu knew that he was that door. And once the door was open, it would never be closed, it would never be locked. And that was the bloodshed among the Muslims and the assassination on the caliphs and the leaders of the Muslims, which became a sunnah for people afterwards, unfortunately. Kill this one, kill that one, fight this one, revolt, etc. Tayyib? So that's one thing. Then we have the concept of the hearts and how the amana will be raised and lifted from the people's hearts. More than one hadith with regards to you barely find someone who's trustworthy. Okay, تُعْرِضُ الْفِتْنَ عَلَى الْقُلُوبِ كَعَرْضِ الْحَصِيرِ عُودًا عُودًا, is that the fitnas will be placed upon the hearts like a straw mat. Strain by strain, piece by piece, right? Several hadiths with regards to the amana being lifted. The first thing being lifted, the amana, so on and so forth. There's several hadiths. And they all have one end. And that is from the to the end of time, towards the coming of the last day, as it states in that hadith as well, إِنَّ بَيْنَ يَدَ السَّاعَةِ سِنِينَ خَدَّاعَةً, before the last hour. It's not necessarily the most authentic hadith. Towards the last hour, there will be years of deception. And a part of those years of deception, يَخُونُ فِيهَا الْأَمِينَ, is that the trustworthy person will become treacherous. And the treacherous person will be given trusts. Those who are supposed to be straight will turn crooked. And those who are clearly crooked, we will deal with them as if they're straight. They all have one end. And that is that the trust, the amana will be lifted. People will break their words, they'll lie, they'll slander. They'll behave like whatever animals you want to mention, snakes, dogs, whatever you say, rats, whatever comparison of your culture that you mention, in which they will not have the basic values to keep their trust. And this is tangible among the Muslims, and even, subhanAllah, look at the non-Muslims. I want to mention a historical story, nothing to do with Islam. I'm sure you brothers here can relate to it in Brooklyn and in New York City, and that is of the Sicilian and the Italian mafia. The Sicilian and the Italian mafia. Who doesn't know about that? Who hasn't watched a movie or comic book, so on and so forth, about the mafia, the mob? Famous. And from that is the breaking of the rule, which is considered to be the first pillar of their 5 pillars of Islam, what they call omerta, and that is the rule of silence, period. There is no cooperation, there is no bearing witness and testifying, there is no talking to the police. Omerta, your lips are sealed. And I'm sure other cultures have it as well, but obviously this is what we're talking about. This is considered to be one of their golden pillars of their 5 pillars of Islam. Silence. If your own son was killed, father, mother, your sister was abused and raped, the police come investigating. Their belief in Sicily, Italy maybe, but island of Sicily, is that you're not allowed to what? Say anything. Police come, what happened to your son? They say, I don't know, I'm not sure. And they consider it to be sacred and holy to keep your mouth shut and to hold your honor and to never cooperate with the authorities. And that it was your religious duty to make the personal vendetta. Is that you have to go take revenge for your dead son or your dead husband or your dead brother, you personally. And if you don't, you die dishonorably. This is a golden qaida. Sicilians, many Italians as well. They came to the United States, migrated to the United States. That's a very long discussion, history of the mafia in America, in New York City, so on and so forth. So for many years, it was unthinkable for a person to turn informant. Unthinkable. Person may trade. They make a hit on this. They break other rules, but you turn into a federal agent, snitching and ratting on the family. It was something which was what? Unthinkable. And of course, we have the famous example of this we were talking about earlier today with Sammy the Bull and John Gotti, the Gambino crime family. And the moment that they heard that Sammy Gravano was talking, he was an informant, and he was cooperating with the federal agents, John and the other family, it was something that they had utter disbelief in. It says impossible. There's no way that could be true. Impossible. He may be scheming on taking control of the family, planning a hit on this one, a car bombing on that one, but he's a federal informant. Believe it. And obviously, that was a major changing point in the Italian and Sicilian mafia. And it was never the same what? Since. It was never the same since. So what's the moral of the story? Is that there will come a time in which the most basic, simple points and principles of keeping trust will be what? Violated. Those hadiths lead to that end. And we see it among the Muslims and among the what? Now, let's think about this. This person's a killer. How many people he killed? How many bodies? Like nothing. How much stolen? How many rules, laws broken? But when it comes to this, that amana is supposed to be sacred. And look what happened. That amana was what? Was violated. And ever since then, there's been a what? It's never been the same for them. And the same applies to what? The Muslims. So that's the meanings of those hadiths. The amana will be raised and lifted. And the trustworthy people will turn otherwise. May Allah help us from that. And of course, towards the end of time, there will always remain what? Trustworthy men and women. There will always remain trustworthy men and women, even though they'll be the minority. And Allah knows best. That's in brief. Enough about what? The mafia, huh? And that's your taqwa. But you all guys, you all get the point, huh? Inshallah. We'll take a question from online. Question states, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. HK from Manchester, UK. Barakallahu feek for your valuable time, Sheikh. If one wants to buy Kutub al-Sitta only in Arabic, not translated, I want to buy it without harakats for motivation. What do you think? Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Feekum barakallah. You can find some, but to find a copy of the 6 books of Hadith without no vowels. Most of the versions that I've seen and come across have the vowels in them. The books that are made for scholars, for students of knowledge, students of Hadith, that don't read the other books with vowels, especially Kutub al-Sitta, most, not all, have the what? The vowels. If you want to practice on reading without the vowels, then there are other books that you can read. Other books that you can use as a means of practice. And of course, when you're learning Arabic, you're learning Nahu and Sarf, you're learning vocabulary, you're studying Arabic properly, it's very important to practice without the vowels. It's very important to practice without the vowels. No doubt until you pick up a live blade. You can't have the wooden sword forever. Even though you're not fully there yet. But you have to, even if it's not unsharpened, you have to practice with a what? With a real sword. So you have to test yourself reading without the vowels. No doubt about that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be in Kutub al-Sitta. But if you find the print out there, alhamdulillah, maybe you could use some of the software that's out there, some of the computer programs, take the vowels out like Maktab al-Shamila, print it out, and then make it yourself. That's an alternative for you as well. But the printed Kutub al-Sitta, most of them that I've seen have all of the vowels in there. And those are for people who read and study Arabic and Hadith, let alone someone trying to practice. Wallahu alam. Next question states, Assalamu alaikum, AA from Brooklyn, New York. Can we shake hands with older women? Jazakallahu khairan. Alaikum salam wa barakatuh. No, don't shake any woman's hand that you're not a mahram for, even if she's older. Stay away from that. Imam, London, UK. When booking a private consultation with you, Sheikh, when is it asked to book the time? Is it based on New York time, as I live in London and want to make sure barakallahu fikum? Wa fikum barakallah. It's Eastern time. That's the default. And you would translate or convert your time to our time, inshallah. Wa alaikum salam wa barakatuh. HH from St. Louis, Missouri. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. What's your advice on studying multiple things at once? Should I focus on the hifz of Quran or learning Arabic mutun, or should I combine them? It depends on what type of memory you got. Photographic memory. Do you have the ability to multitask? How much are you taking? It depends. It depends. Yeah, and it's like anything else in life. You have a 4-course meal. If it's not too much of one thing, if it's good chemistry with the things on your plate, it's not overwhelming, no problem. If it's overwhelming, it doesn't mix well, stick with 1 or 2 things. It depends what type of eater you are. It depends. HH, Manchester, UK. Sheikh, it is a double standard. There's a claim that the beard is a danger in carrying COVID. I ask myself, can't COVID be spread through our head, eyebrow, arm, hair also? Why not shave this also? Well, at the end of the day, like we said, COVID is going to bring the ugliest out. It's going to bring the ugly out of the ugliest. The people who have diseases and sicknesses in their hearts. May Allah protect us and remedy us and heal us and keep us from those things. Those who had those diseases in their hearts before COVID, they're not going to have nothing more than more venom to spew out. Nasty, ugly, disgusting. It's not sunnah to wear a beard, it's Arab culture to have a beard. Or the Prophet said, be different from the Jews, be different from the Zoroastrians, be different from the pagans. Well, now, in Brooklyn, we see the what? The Jews with what? Full beards. So therefore, we should shave our faces today. That hadith is abrogated. It was back then in Arabia. Nowadays, the Jews have long beards, so we need to have shaven faces. And the rest of the things that you hear about the beard. It's unclean, uncouth, you can't get hired like that. We're not living in this empire, in this dynasty. You're a terrorist if you have a beard. You're part of this group. You follow this person. You have a bomb in your bag because you have a beard. The beard is intimidating. And unfortunately, you may even hear from some scholars and some people who are learned or attributed to ilm that the beard shouldn't be but so long. It's showing off if it's too long. It's shuhra. You'll find this in the kalam of scholars. The beard shouldn't be too long. هناك 10 خصال تكره في اللحية. The 10 things that shouldn't be done with a Muslim's man's beard. Many ulama have spoken about this. Did the Prophet say that? Did the Prophet ﷺ say, don't grow your beards too long because you'll show off? Don't have your beards but so big because it'll be a means of showing off. Did the Prophet say that? Okay, the Prophet ﷺ said, let the beard drape. You hang a curtain down. What does gravity do to the drape? What does it do? It does what? It falls as long as it is allowed to fall. All right? So you hear a lot of kalam about the beard, right? So people who said things like this before COVID, now they just have a better excuse to say more things about the beard. That's the bottom line. But look how Allah exposes their hypocrisy. Muslim women shouldn't cover their faces. It's barbaric. It's inhumane. It's misogynic. Men are chauvinist pigs. Why does she have to cover her face? Why can't a woman wear perfume where you can